you would be so kind, go ahead and introduce Brian.
It is my pleasure to introduce this very special man. Hi, everybody. My name is Lou Ann. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you to everybody who makes this meeting possible. Your service is just beautiful and helps all of us tremendously. And welcome to all our new folks. So I look at you, Brian, and I can't help but think about the very first time I met you. And it was at a Big Book Comes Alive seminar. And you might not remember it. It was probably 28 years ago. And you were dark around the eyes and you had those beady eyes that pivoted all over the place, right? You had a hat on. You looked like a thug. You just did. And you were not somebody that I ever in my wildest dreams that I would think that I would trust and I admire. And thanks to the miracle of this program and the work that you've done in your steps and in your service, I can say those things. So I will share with this group, I have a little bit of trouble trusting men, especially, and you're one of the guys I trust. In fact, when I had a question about honesty and Glenn, you weren't available and Bahia wasn't available, I called you because I was like, I'm a single woman. I've got this guy coming over my house. I want to tell him my son's home. I'm not. So anyway, if you need a go-to person in the program who really knows the spirit of our program, which truly is the language of our heart, Brian is a beautiful, beautiful example of that. So it is my pleasure to introduce you to my friend, Brian.
Thank you, Luann. Am I on now? All right. I thank you, Luann. That's so basically what she's saying. If you want the advice to be that it's okay to lie, then call me. My number is at the top of the chat. If you're looking for that advice specifically, I'm your guy. I am an alcoholic. My home group is the Thursday Night Study Group in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and my name is Brian Haynes. And I'll usually remember to not say my last name when I know it's being recorded, but I goofed. And thank you so much for asking me to be here, Amy, and for the introduction, Luann, and for all of my friends that are here. It's so wonderful to see you all out there. Thanks so much for coming. Yeah, I'm gonna. You know, I love Zoom meetings. I know Pat's over them, but you know, I just, you know, this week had a, you know, because of, you know, COVID cases on the rise in the area, I just swore off going to my own home group physically again. So I've been there for 6 weeks and now I'm going back inside. Thank God for Zoom. Thank God for, hey, Tom. Thank God for the choice of how we can, you know, do this. I like live meetings. I prefer live meetings, but I'm very, very happy that we have this alternative because it fits when we want to be a part of AA, and for whatever reason, we're not going to physical meetings. So thank God for this platform. I walked into Joe and Charlie Big Book study in May of 1991. And it changed my life. And so, you know, what I want to say about that is that I've been sober since 1988. February 24th, 1988 is my anniversary date. I was working my way out of AA when I went to that Big Book study. And Joe and Charlie planted me. They plucked me out of an AA that just doesn't even resemble what I think of when I think of AA today. I just had no clue. Like, I had been here for 3 years and didn't know what AA was. I show up to a Big Book study practically against my will and find out what AA is and went, holy cow, I need that. I'm in, and I've been in ever since. You know, but that wasn't how my sobriety started. Like it took me a little while to get there. And if anything, what I really like to do is try to save anybody the time it took me to get there, because, you know, my life was on the line and I didn't really understand that. And I was playing Russian roulette with my sobriety and with my life. And I didn't even understand that I wasn't making myself available to the miracle that AA had to offer. And so what I like to do is talk a little bit about how that occurred for me, and the hopes that it could shortcut that process for anybody else. And that's really the main thrust of the story that I want to tell. So I was arrested February 24th, 1988, weighing 125 pounds. Now it's a little probably difficult for Zoom land to appreciate how absolutely disgusting that is. I am 6'3" tall, and I weigh 270 pounds right now. I do not look good at 125 pounds. I am almost dead at 125 pounds. And at this point, I like to just make an apology, and so I can get it in and out of the way. Apparently, I learned this from somebody who heard Tom say it, but I've been doing it ever since. So, but I would like to start with an apology. So, what I want to do is I want to apologize to everybody who's here in attendance and everybody that's going to listen to this recording. Had I known that I would one day become a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, I never would have smoked crack. I would have left that shit alone. I would not have done it. I'm not here to tell you a story about, you know, a drug addict who got sober in AA. That's not my story. I'm an alcoholic who got sober in AA, but I didn't know that right away. I really thought that I was a drug addict who was going to AA meetings because there was more of them closer to my home. And if you look at my life pre-sobriety, the drugs are the easy target. They're like obviously that's his problem. And even for me, I thought that was my problem. And it's not that that's not a problem. It's just that it wasn't the problem. And so what I hope to get to is a clarification of that, because that clarification is the same clarification that rockets me into the miracle that Alcoholics Anonymous had waiting for me, that needed my participation, and it wasn't getting it because I didn't understand what this was. I really did not understand what this was. So February 24th, 1988, I get arrested again in DeKalb County, Georgia. I'm put in the backseat of a police car, and for the first time in 2 years, because I've been going in and out of jail for 2 years, so this is not a new occurrence for me. You know, the big book talks about how our alcoholic life seems the only normal one. Well, you know, the first time I went to jail, that was abnormal. The 26th time I went to jail, that became normal, right? So this is my life, and this is the new normal for me. And so, you know, every other time though that I had gone to jail, I used to sing this little song. You know, it was the little song that sounded like this: I am never going to do that again. I am never going to have another drug. I am never going to take another drink. I'm, you know, I'm not seeing those people anymore. I'm not going to those places anymore. I'm never going to do that again. And every other time I would say that, they would let me out of jail, or I'd get out of whatever jackpot that I'm in. And, you know, I would hold out for a few days, maybe a few weeks, sometimes even a month, and then I would start drinking again. And then once I started drinking, there's no telling what I would do next. And so that had been basically my life for 2 years straight. I know 2 years sounds like a short period of time, but I've been sober since I was 19 years old. So hang in there. That was my life for the 2 years prior to the 19-year-old who gets arrested weighing 125 pounds, almost killed myself on a major run. And this time, I know that I am going to drink and I'm going to get high when I get out. And I know that no matter how bad I would want otherwise, I have no choice whatsoever in the matter. Now, if you fast forward to AA and the first step, that was me the very first time I ever admitted that I was powerless over alcohol and that my life was unmanageable. I didn't have that language yet. I didn't know what those things were yet, but that was the first time that I can look at my life and go, that's me admitting that that's true for me. I go into jail, I meet a guy who, you know, and you got to understand, like a 125-year-old in jail, weighing 125 pounds. I've been in jail many times in a couple of years. It's a routine. I'm lucid. I know what my surroundings are, but I'm scanning my environment. If you don't scan your environment, if you're used to going to jail, if you don't scan your environment, you don't know what to look out for and how to conduct yourself, right? So that's me. That's what I'm doing. But all I'm doing, here's the thing, I'm lucid. When I'm awake, I'm scanning my environment. But the reality is that for 2 weeks, all I could do was eat and sleep. I was incredibly underweight. I was in an environment where every square on your tray is a commodity to be traded for cigarettes or a honey bun from commissary or something like that. I had people sending me food. Imagine that. They were just sending what they weren't eating from their food trays to me. That's how bad I looked. I don't know if I still look that bad when Luann met me or not. She said, I think she's actually got me confused with somebody else.
No, you were scanning. You were still scanning.
Okay. But I was in desperate physical condition. And so for a couple of weeks, all I did was wake up when they called chow, go and eat, take a shower, go back to sleep, and repeat. But I was lucid and I knew my environment. And there was this guy there named Melvin Boston, who I'll never forget. Melvin was the opposite of what I was expecting, because Melvin is this big, tall, built black guy. And I'm used to, like me, I'm used to this toughest guy in the place, running the most game. Like that's just like, that's kind of how it is in this environment. And Melvin is the quietest, mildest mannered guy I've ever seen. I've never seen a guy this size in this environment who was so even-tempered, so mild-mannered, so calm, cool, and collected, and it got my attention. It wasn't too long before I realized that, Melvin's, one of these guys who studies the Bible with a few guys around his bunk, and has, doesn't mind praying with, 5 or 6 or 7 guys in the middle of the place on their knees. I mean, this is a 40 men are in a 20-man dorm. That's basically the environment that I'm in. 40 inmates in a 20 inmate dorm, and this is Melvin, and Melvin was the only other thing I remembered about Melvin before having this conversation I'm about to describe to you is that he used to come out every evening for back-to-back episodes of Cheers when it was in syndication. That also dates the story for you. So he would come out and he would watch Cheers, back-to-back episodes of Cheers in syndication. And here's the thing, I don't talk to people like Melvin. I was raised Catholic. I had not been to church since I was 13 years old. I wasn't like anti-church or anti-religion. I just didn't care. It never meant anything to me as a kid when I was going. It was never anything that I connected with personally. And I didn't know much about it, and I didn't care to know much about it. And so I would not engage in people who wanted to have conversations about religion. And so I avoid people like Melvin, stay away. And to this day, I have no idea how or why I ended up having a conversation with Melvin Boston. But Melvin told me a story about what his life was like when he was addicted to drugs and alcohol. He told me a story of the miracle that God created in his life. And he told me what his life was like since. And so it's an odd story coming from an inmate who's in jail with me. I know, but Melvin was there, and he was sober for, I don't know how long. Like whatever he said, it sounded like he said forever. Like it could have been 2 or 3 years. It could have been 6 or 7 years. I really don't know how long it was, but he was there cleaning up some things from his past, maybe something had caught up with him. I don't really know the exact part of that story, but I have never heard a story like that. Melvin tells me the story about what his life was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And I'm floored because I have never heard this story. And I came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity as a result of that story. I now believe that maybe God could do for me what he had done for Melvin. And I followed Melvin to church on Sunday. The church group that he met with sent a Bible into the jail. And I began my spiritual journey that day. Now, Melvin was not a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, but I would be remiss if I didn't say that this is where the journey begins for me. It's a rocky journey for the first few years, but this is where it begins. Now, I was in that jail for 6 months, and I visited 5 different jail cells. Model inmates don't change jail cells. I was shackled up and brought to Broward County back here to South Florida and given a 2-year prison sentence because I had violated probation. About 9 months before I got arrested this time, I was arrested in Pompano Beach, Florida, weighing 127 pounds. This is a theme. This is a pattern. This has been going on for a couple of years, right? I violated felony probation. They brought me back to South Florida and gave me a 2-year prison sentence. At the time, I was supposed to do 3 months on 2 years. I did 6. Model inmates do not do twice as much time as they're supposed to do. I was as much trouble in jail, clean and sober, as I was outside on drugs and alcohol. I love Melvin. I don't think I'm here. I don't think I'm alive. I don't think I'm sober today if I don't meet him. But that wasn't the answer to my problem. It was the beginning. It was the tickle. It was the seed, but it was not the answer to my problem. Fast forward, March 9th, 1989, I get out of prison and I'm at my first AA meeting, and it's in Deerfield Beach. It's the Deerfield Beach Happy Hour group. And it met at 5:30 at the time on Mondays and Thursdays, and at 6 o'clock on a Saturday. I actually got out of prison on Thursday, but my first meeting is on a Sunday. By the way, if you're listening to this and you know people in that situation, what I found out later is that I cut my chances of staying sober by 85% by not going to a meeting the first day out of prison. That's the statistic. 85% don't stay sober if they don't go to a meeting their first day out. I went to a meeting my second day out, and I met other people that were going to change my life, but it's still going to be a rocky road. So the theme of this story should be the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind. Because I came out and I was in, by the way, just the short version of that prison story is I was in treatment in prison the last 3 months I was there. They plucked me out of general population, stuck me in a treatment center, went in kicking and screaming, ended up surrendering to the program. And so I've had a head full of drug and alcohol treatment prior to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I came into AA with an idea of what this was. I thought I knew what you do, and I did not know that I had no clue. And so to me, my paradigm for Alcoholics Anonymous was, this is where we go to talk about our problems and help each other stay sober one day at a time. Now, I'm not arguing that that's part of what we do here. It's certainly part of what we do here. But that's not what this is, right? That's not what this is. And to me, that's what this is. And I could not see anything different. And so, yes, I would hear people talking about the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'd say, that's great if you want to be a zealot about it. I would hear people talking about God and I would go, that's great, but I go to church for that. I just had this impenetrable understanding or lack of understanding of what this was, that was very difficult, I imagine, for everybody who knew me for those first couple of years. And so the short version of this story is that for my first year, that's all working out great because I'm staying sober. I have a sponsor. We're doing steps, eating, reading the big book and stuff like that. I don't understand any of that. I'm probably like, what I know now looking back is that I was rejecting most of what was the most important stuff. But I was staying sober. But then the first person that I became friends with in AA gets drunk a year later. Not the first person I knew in AA to get drunk, but my first friend in AA. He was a guy who met me at that very first meeting, chatted me up, found out I just got out of prison the day before. Like, he really made me feel at home. And that's why that group became my home group, why I got a sponsor off that temporary sponsorship list. He drank a year later, and it threw me for a tailspin. And I had no earthly idea that it had. So hear me. Like, Bruce drinks. I lose faith in AA. I lose faith in my own sobriety. And I don't even know that it's happened. That's how little work had been done. That's how little self-awareness I had at that time of what was going on. And for the next year, I was working my way out. For that first year, I did all the stuff I was supposed to do. I mean, I used to read my relapse prevention plan for like the first 3 months. I used to read that thing every single morning and get my day started with it. I was at meetings 4, 5, 6 nights a week. I had a sponsor. We had a group picnic once a year. We participated in AA events around. I mean, I was doing all of this stuff, following all of the rules and regular contact, showing up at all the meetings, blah, 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 for the first year. And then the second year, after Bruce drank, I'm working my way out. And I can see this now. I could not see it then. And what I want to say is that, well, I'll just say this. Things got so bad, and I got so bad between my ears that I was dating a newcomer, which of course, why wouldn't I be? And some idiot in AA, I would usually use, inappropriate language, but I'm trying not to do that for you guys. Some idiot in AA convinced this girl that I'm dating that this Joe and Charlie Big Book Seminar thing would be an important thing for her to do. You got to understand, I'm 19 when I go to prison. I'm 20 when I get out. I'm 21 years old. I'll be 22 later the same year that I go and see Joe and Charlie for the first time. I don't listen to old timers. I'm not a fan. I don't listen to big book thumpers. I'm not interested. Like my meeting, my sweet spot in AA is a group where we just discuss our problems, where somebody, the chairperson asks, does anybody have a problem or a topic? Somebody brings up a problem. Very often it's relationships, because that's just a winner for us. And then you listen to 12 or 15 people talk about relationships for 50 minutes. Most of them have been married and divorced 6 times. And then we close the meeting. I mean, that's me. That's the sweet spot for me in AA. I know these big book guys. They come into a meeting like mine and they're like, no, you got to follow the directions out of the big book. You got to find God. You got to work the steps. You got to help it. Yo, man, chill out. Like, what are you doing in here? Like, that's like you just threw a rock in my Zen pond. Like, get out of here with that. And old timers were not like, I respect my elders. Old timers stories just never sounded like anything that I related to. Like, every old timer's story to me sounded like, my life was going really, really great. I had a job, an education, a car, a family, and I started, my drinking caught up with me, and I started losing all of that stuff, and they lose everything in their life, and then they enter Alcoholics Anonymous and start putting it all back together again. And I like, that's I don't relate to that story. Like, I never lost everything in my life through drinking. I never got anything in my life because of my drinking. Mind me, but that's a different story, right? And I know some of you are out there going, "Oh, didn't they teach you to identify and not compare?" Yeah, they did. They taught me to identify and not compare. I just didn't know that that's where that applied. Like the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind. I just didn't. I understood I'm supposed to identify and not compare. I just didn't know that that's what you called what I was doing. I was just absolutely still checked out. 2 years of sobriety be damned, it didn't matter. And I and so this girl that I'm dating wants to go to this big book study. And if you don't already know what a big book seminar is or a big book study is, it's listening to two old timers talk about the big book for 4 freaking days. This is the last thing in the world that I am interested in doing. I cannot think of a thing that I would want to go to less. And she's cute. So I'm there. I mean, I wish I had a better story for how I end up at a big book seminar, but it's as lame as that. And I arrive at a big book seminar. I don't have a big book with me. I don't have a 12 and 12 with me. I don't have a highlighter. I don't have a pen, a piece of paper. I don't have a pot to piss in. The girl that I came with, she's got a tote bag. She's got big books, 12 and 12s, highlighters, pens, pencils, notepads, like for both of us. I know now we're talking about a whole nother fellowship, right? Right. But she's got all that gear for both of us. I don't know what the heck I'm going to. I think I'm just going to go sit in the back and sit on my hands for a couple of hours and endure this thing. And I get there, and Joe and Charlie are talking about allergy of the body, obsession of the mind, how alcoholics have a physical craving for alcohol. That once they take a drink, their body craves alcohol and they cannot control how much they drink once they take a few drinks. And I'm like, holy cow, that is what happens to me when I drink. That's exactly, that nails it. That's exactly what happens. That's over and over and over again. I very seldom ever went out to drink to just have a few, but I would go out on a Friday night to drink, and I was only going to drink Friday night. I was not going to drink Saturday night. I had to open the store on Sunday morning. I was a teenager working in a retail store. They always let the family guys, the older guys, off on Sunday morning so they could do things with their families. I was always the opener on a Sunday morning. I could never make it to work on time on a Sunday morning, ever. And very often I showed up, I was still drunk from the night before. And so I would get 3 hours sleep, and I would still be loaded when I got there, if I got there at all. And so I would always like go out on a Friday night intending never to drink on a Saturday. And I would always, Saturday afternoon, I would wake up and I would find a case. I would go get a case of beer, and I would find people to drink with. I just could not stop once I started. And then they started talking about how alcoholics have an obsession of the mind. How the mind of an alcoholic lies to them. It convinces them. And over time, it tells them a story, and it weaves a story that will enable them to figure out that they can drink and not end up having all of these horrible consequences that they've always had in their life, right? And so that's what would happen to me. I would get out of jail. I would be absolutely crystal clear that the first drink is what put me there. Like, there's a connection made. I would go to jail, and that connection will be right there, man. Oh, I can see it so well. I started drinking on Thursday, and then by Sunday, I'm out of money, and I'm, stealing things, and now I'm in jail, and I can see it. Like, if I hadn't taken the drink, none of this would have happened. You leave me in jail for a couple of weeks, and then let me out for a couple of more, all of a sudden, those two ideas that were connected like that have no connection whatsoever. It was the people. It was it was the job I had. It was I just had like the obsession of the mind would just run this story in my mind. It would allow me to disconnect the drink from all of the problems that I've been having. And I would be able to take a few drinks, and then I'd be off to the races again. And I'm sitting in this big book seminar going, holy shit, man, I'm an alcoholic. Now, I've been going to AA for 2 years. I've been sober. I guess I've been sober for 3, actually. I've been sober for 3 years at that point, right? I've been going to AA for 2 of them. My first year I was in jail and prison. And this is a revelation to me, because up until that point in time, I thought I was a drug addict going to AA because there was more meetings closer to my home. That's not true. I do have a problem with drugs for sure. Let me tell you something. I almost never went from zero to drugs. I always went for the few beers or the few drinks. The few drinks, and then once I had a few drinks, I couldn't control how much I drank. I would get good and loaded. And I'm a kind of alcoholic that when I get good and loaded, I don't stop with alcohol. You know, I move on to other things. But I'm a real alcoholic and I didn't know it. And I'm sitting in there and I'm going, holy shit, I am an alcoholic. And that's not really the biggest revelation. Up until that point in time, step one to me was more like, I mean, I know what the words say. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. That's what it says. What it meant to me, remember, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind. What it meant to me was, if I want to stay out of jail, I should not drink. That's pretty much, like, to me, that was the first step. Like, if I want to stay out of jail and be able to, not have my family and everybody who loves me upset with me all the time, I shouldn't drink. I really didn't get that I was powerless. I had no idea about the fact that I had this allergy, that once I started, I couldn't stop. Now, I've been stopped for a couple of years, so that wasn't the biggest revelation. But the fact that I had this mental obsession, the fact that I had this insanity for the first drink, that I identified with strongly. I knew I was the guy my very first, but that time that I got arrested and was put on felony probation, they did me a solid the same day that I got out of jail. What they did was they told me that in 30 days, they're going to drop a urine on me. And if I had any drugs or alcohol in my system, they were going to violate me. And I thought, wow, what a heads up, man. I made it 28 days and then drank 2 days before that test. 28 days and could not hold out. The main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind, which tells him he can drink, rather than his body, which ensures that he can't. Crystal, like, I'm listening to Joe and Charlie break down the doctor's opinion, and I'm going, holy cow, that's my problem. And they went through the whole book talking about how the solution to that problem is a spiritual awakening or a spiritual experience. And that the steps were a set of principles that, if followed, would lead us to a spiritual experience or a spiritual awakening where we would no longer want to drink. And all of a sudden, this whole thing makes sense to me in a way that it never had before. And I'm like, I'm in. Like, where do I sign up? Like, get what, let's do this, And I've been off like a rocket like that ever since that day, pretty much. I'm not going to say that my life hasn't had its bumps and bruises. It certainly has. But as far as Alcoholics Anonymous goes, I've been off like a rocket like that ever since. And the thing is that, everything about my life, like everything that I did in AA changed once I got the first step. And so that was me getting the first step. Up until that time, I really didn't get the first step. But once I understood, like, these facts, I'm going to die if I don't have a spiritual awakening. Like, once I got it, like, crystal clear that was my reality, that I am going to drink again. I knew to a man sitting in that seminar, getting that information, that I was going to drink again. I knew it. I knew unless something dramatic happened, unless I had AA's solution, I knew I was going to drink again. The doctor's opinion explained, and not just the doctor's opinion, the chapter 2 and chapter 3, like, that whole beginning part of the book, like, explained what had been going on with me physically, mentally, emotionally, so well that I knew that if I didn't find this spiritual experience, I was going to die. And so what actually happened is I started participating in AA like somebody who understood that if I didn't find a spiritual experience, I was going to die, which was the truth. Up until that time, I was not participating like that. I was participating like, this is a good idea. If I want my life to work out and have my parents and people that love me not mad at me, this is a good idea. That is not how I'm here today. I am crystal clear. that unless I find a spiritual experience, I am going to die. I'm going to drink again and I'm going to die. And I've been in every meeting that I went to changed look, at first I became angry. I became one of those, you've probably seen guys like me in AA, a guy who's in mediocre, open discussion hell AA for a couple of years. Then they get some information about the big book and they become big book assholes. That was me for the next year easily. I was that guy. I was that guy who was going to some of the same meetings I used to go to, and I would listen to somebody share, and I would say, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. That's not in our big book. I was that guy. I mean, I don't know what you expect. I mean, I had 2 years of sobriety. I had a head full of Joe and Charlie big book AA and zero recovery at that point, like zero. Like I hadn't practiced a lick of this yet. And that was just the best I could do. But in that time, I actually met Pat. And what happened was that I started settling down into the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. It didn't happen like my mind was changed right away, but I was just a big book idiot. But what happened was that I changed my home group, I changed my sponsor, I changed all of the people that I hung out with in AA. I used to keep a little wallet, phone book in my wallet, a little magnet phone book. I don't know if they still sell them anymore. It was like 2 magnets that who needs it anymore? You got cell phones now. But I remember I had to change that like 3 times in the next year because I just kept running out of space for all the new numbers, and most of the numbers in it, the first one I didn't call anymore. And so I like everything about how I was in AA, changed. And as a result of that, I started settling in with people who understood the big book and the steps, and were talking about God and spirituality, and we're changing their lives from the inside out. And I fell in with them. And some of us were too self-righteous, probably for most people in AA. But that, hey, look, self-righteousness is my lane. So it worked for me for a while. Like that was the groove I got into. The self-righteous asshole big book thumper groove was a groove I fit very, very easily into. And I fit into that groove long enough that it changed my life. And then on the other side, I could start going, yeah, well, maybe this self-righteousness doesn't work. Maybe I should just, let people be people and let them be in AA how they're going to be in AA. Understanding also that I wasn't setting a very good example of being in AA my first couple of years either. And I've started to lighten up. As part of my experience in AA, I have had opportunity to work with a lot of alcoholics. My journey through radical changes in my psyche actually took longer than I even care to admit. I hit sticking point after sticking point after sticking point, and brings me back to why I focus so much of my story on the part that I've just shared with you. Because Alcoholics Anonymous, come to find out, is actually designed that if you're a newcomer and identify with the problem, can accept the solution, it's intended for you to be in action about the solution immediately. If you take the first 5,000 people who recovered from alcoholism in Alcoholics Anonymous, they weren't taking a step a year. They weren't doing they took their steps in their first weeks of sobriety. They did their steps in days, not months, not weeks, but in days. I'm not saying that your sobriety is not valid if it took you weeks or months to go through the steps. Don't hear that. That's not what I'm saying. Most people, I'm just saying that when this thing started, what they were doing, when they were having a 75% or better success rate, what they were doing is that they were identifying somebody with the problem, the hopelessness, the powerlessness, the despair of alcoholism through telling their stories. And then they were explaining the solution. And those that were ready got right into it. Dr. Bob sponsored thousands of people, and almost all of them the same way. Their brain would be cleared in 10 or 14 days. He'd have them over to his office and they'd go through the steps in an afternoon, right? That's not how I did it. And that's not how most of us do it today. But the reality is that Alcoholics Anonymous is designed to take a new person and introduce them to the program immediately, and then set them off to practicing it every day in 10, 11, and 12, right? What my sponsor called implement now, perfect later. Put it into practice immediately, as quickly, in a short period of time, and then take your whole life to sharpen that saw, to implement that, to struggle with it, to bump up against more information, to have problems and come back to it, and listen to some speaker and go, oh my God, I never looked at it. That all of that will take place. Like the growing and the learning will continue and continue and continue, as it has for me and anybody else who's been here. Right? I'm not even the same person I was 2 years ago, for God's sakes, let alone 33 years ago. That happens to all of us. But the point of it is to get it in place immediately. Alcoholics Anonymous is designed to implement that program, that life-saving, changing program, to allow that spiritual experience to happen and occur early in sobriety. That's the way it's designed. If you're like me and you take a couple of years to actually get to it, you're probably going to have a few more bumps in the road. It took me a little longer to actually be able to see that I had character defects that needed working on. It took me a long time to understand what making amends to somebody really is, right? That doesn't have to be your struggle. If you take this thing seriously when you're new, you can get all of that in place early on. By the time I went to a Joe and Charlie Big Book seminar, I had more to unlearn about Alcoholics Anonymous than I had to learn. And it was a struggle. It was a bigger struggle than it needed to be. Through sticking it out, through my phases, some of them very, very ugly, especially the self-righteous big book thumper phase. Some of the phases of my sobriety have been very, very ugly and unpleasant for people in AA, for sure. But the thing is that through all of that, I kept growing, I kept learning, I kept meeting new people, I kept listening to speakers, I kept on going to big book seminars. I've not missed a big book seminar in South Florida since 1991. Even we had COVID and I was still at one on Zoom, right? I have not missed one. And through all of that time, my life has grown and changed immensely. Alcoholics, and by the way, I live a pretty good life for a guy who started out 33 years ago having his first year of sobriety in jail and prison. If you look at my life today, I don't look like a guy that's how it started out. That doesn't seem, most people who learn that about me today are like, no way, really? I have a completely different experience today than I was on track for having. And it's an absolute miracle. And the truth of the matter is, I rarely even take the time to appreciate what a miracle that is. It's because I get to speak and tell my story in Alcoholics Anonymous, or sponsor a newcomer and start telling that story, that I'm ever forced to pause long enough to really reflect and appreciate the miracle that Alcoholics Anonymous has, the miracle that I almost let just sail right by. Right? I almost became one of those people who just relapsed, and then who knows? I mean, I've seen so many people struggle for years to get sober, and look, I don't think my sobriety is any better than any of theirs. I know people who I have learned immensely from in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, whose stories in the 33 years that I've been sober, they have picked up a dozen white chips. People that were my heroes in Alcoholics Anonymous have traveled that path, and on any given day, I could only hope to practice this program as well as they did, right? So I'm not here saying that I'm sober and they're not still sober because they did it any better. I'm just very, very grateful that I have the path that I took. Alcoholics Anonymous, in exchange for what I think is a pretty freaking cool life, has only ever asked one thing in return: that I show up and do this, that I make myself available to tell my story, that I take the hand of a newcomer and show them the same way that I was shown. That is a responsibility that I don't take lightly. It is the thing, it is the one thing that I can see very, very clearly through 3 decades of sobriety that has kept me in this program, not just around it, but actually in it, doing the work, is sponsoring new people and continuing to take people through the steps. That is the one thing I think has saved my life over and over and over and over again, because I'm the kind of person who would rather not do this. But man, if I'm teaching somebody else how to do it, I'm doing it. So thanks for letting me share.
Well done. Well done.